Hello everyone, tonight we step into the very ordinary strangeness of prehistoric life, hunting, fire, and fear. From boiling water with red-hot stones dropped into a bark basket, to cracking long bones for marrow like you're opening nature's hidden butter, to carrying a smoldering ember in dung so tomorrow's breakfast actually happens. This is the daily grind before clocks and coffee. If this kind of sleepy archaeology makes your brain purr, feel free to like and subscribe only if it earns a spot next to your favorite late-night rituals. No pressure. I'm allergic to desperate outros. Tell me where you're watching from and what time your night found you. I love seeing the map light up midnight kitchens, bus rides, insomniac studios. Now, lower the lights, steal a blanket, let the fan hum or the kettle whisper, and settle in. We'll keep the fire small and the stories warm, and slip, quietly, into the camp. Let me tell you about the person you could have been. Not the one scrolling half awake through a phone alarm, but the one waking to the faint crackle of dying embers and the suspicious rustle just beyond the firelight. Imagine that, instead of hitting snooze, your first task on Earth is making sure a hyena hasn't dragged off your cousin in the night. That's your morning routine. Forget oat milk lattes, what you've got is smoke in your eyes and the kind of cold that bites bone. You would have slept curled into a mess of relatives, skin against skin, all of you using each other as insulation because prehistoric nights were less romantic stargazing and more try not to freeze to death. Fires rarely roared. They smoldered, tended by whoever pulled the short straw of the night watch. Usually it was the older kids or unlucky adults, eyes stinging, nudging coals with a stick and whispering curses at the wind. You think you're tired at work. Try staying awake with saber-toothed shadows circling just outside the glow. When dawn actually broke, the light didn't so much gently stream as expose. First job, check the ground. Because dirt was a morning newspaper, you read it for tracks, for scat, for the delicate pattern of paws or hooves that told you whether breakfast walked past or whether you were about to become breakfast. One look at the soil and you'd know if it was going to be a day of hunting, hiding, or both. Water came next. Not pouring from a kitchen tap, but fetched from streams that could double as crocodile buffets. Someone had to go, usually in pairs, balancing skin bags or shells, hoping not to slip. Imagine starting your day with cardio, high-stakes edition. Will I drown, or will I bring home a drink? That's before you've even thought about food. Back at camp, others were busy patching things up. Shelters weren't permanent mansions, they sagged, leaked, collapsed. A strong wind could scatter your house like a bad IKEA project. So mornings were full of small repairs, retying plant fibers, repositioning hide coverings, plugging gaps with mud. Survival didn't wait for weekends. It was maintenance every single sunrise. And there's the fire, always the fire. The line between life and death was measured in embers. You didn't light a fresh one every morning because good luck striking sparks in damp air with tired fingers. You kept it alive, carried it like treasure, tucked in bark or dung to smolder through the day. Without it, you couldn't cook, ward off animals, or even thaw your numb toes. Every dawn was a gamble. Did the fire survive? If not, congratulations, you're walking miles to beg a flame from the next camp, like a prehistoric neighbor borrowing sugar but angrier. The eerie part, even at this hour, before the day truly began, you were already living inside a net of danger. Cold, predators, hunger, infectionate, all pressed in at once. And the first light didn't chase fear away. It just revealed how much work you had waiting. The irony is rich. In our world, Donna's Instagram filters and poetic metaphors. Back then, it was more like a cosmic audit. Survived the night. Great, now try again. But don't get too comfortable, because dawn wasn't just the end of fear, it was the start of hunger. And hunger, in a foraging world, was a boss you never stopped working for. Which means, right after tending fires and reading the dirt, you'd better be ready to spend the rest of the day chasing calories with a dedication that makes your gym routine look like a nap. Let me tell you about the person you could have been. not the one scrolling half awake through a phone alarm, but the one waking to the faint crackle of dying embers and the suspicious rustle just beyond the firelight. Imagine that, instead of hitting snooze, your first task on Earth is making sure a hyena hasn't dragged off your cousin in the night. That's your morning routine. Forget oat milk lattes, what you've got is smoke in your eyes, and the kind of cold that bites bone. You would have slept curled into a mess of relatives, skin against skin, all of you using each other as insulation because prehistoric nights were less romantic stargazing and more try not to freeze to death. Fires rarely roared. They smoldered, tended by whoever pulled the short straw of the night watch. Usually it was the older kids or unlucky adults, eyes stinging, nudging coals with a stick and whispering curses at the wind. You think you're tired at work. Try staying awake with saber-toothed shadows, circling just outside the glow. When dawn actually broke, the light didn't so much gently stream as expose. First job, check the ground. Because dirt was a morning newspaper, you read it for tracks, for scat, for the delicate pattern of paws or hooves that told you whether breakfast walked past, or whether you were about to become breakfast. One look at the soil and you'd know if it was going to be a day of hunting, hiding, or both. Water came next, not pouring from a kitchen tap, but fetched from streams that could double as crocodile buffets. Someone had to go, usually in pairs, balancing skin bags or shells, hoping not to slip. Imagine starting your day with cardio, high-stakes edition. Will I drown, or will I bring home a drink? That's before you've even thought about food. Back at camp, others were busy patching things up. Shelters weren't permanent mansions. They sagged, leaked, collapsed. A strong wind could scatter your house like a bad IKEA project. So mornings were full of small repairs, retying plant fibers, repositioning hide coverings, plugging gaps with mud. Survival didn't wait for weekends. It was maintenance every single sunrise. And there's the fire. Always the fire. The line between life and death was measured in embers. You didn't light a fresh one every morning because good luck striking sparks in damp air with tired fingers. You kept it alive, carried it like treasure, tucked in bark or dung to smolder through the day. Without it, you couldn't cook, ward off animals, or even thaw your numb toes. Every dawn was a gamble. Did the fire survive? If not, congratulations, you're walking miles to beg a flame from the next camp, like a prehistoric neighbor borrowing sugar but angrier. The eerie part. Even at this hour, before the day truly began, you were already living inside a net of danger. Cold, predators, hunger, infectionate, all pressed in at once. And the first light didn't chase fear away. It just revealed how much work you had waiting. The irony is rich. In our world, dawn is Instagram filters and poetic metaphors. Back then, it was more like a cosmic audit. Survived the night. Great. Now try again. But don't get too comfortable. Because dawn wasn't just the end of fear, it was the start of hunger. And hunger, in a foraging world, was a boss you never stopped working for. Which means, right after tending fires and reading the dirt, you'd better be ready to spend the rest of the day chasing calories with a dedication that makes your gym routine look like a nap. And hunger, being the rudest manager in history, doesn't care that you've just put the camp back together. It wants a plan. Here's the first truth you'd learn the hard way. Your day isn't one long heroic charge at a mammoth. It's a quiet, relentless negotiation with the landscape. Big hunts are headlines. Most of your calories are the classifieds, small, steady, and slightly unglamorous. You'd get to know which tubers leave your hands itchy until you roast them, which nuts crack cleanly, which berries stain your mouth but not your stomach. You'd learn the sound a distant flock makes when the wind turns, and how shellfish keep their own reliable calendar that ignores your feelings entirely. If you'd been that person, you'd measure life in returns, though you'd never call it that. How many calories back for the effort and risk you pour in? Digging for roots pays. If you've mapped the soil and kept a mental spreadsheet of where last season's greens came up. Fishing pays hands, weirs, baskets, hooks, especially when the river is in a generous mood. A small game pays if you move softly and carry a stick smarter than you are. Insects, don't make that face. Some of them are little packets of fat and protein that never once tried to gore you. Fear, you'll notice, has poor return on investment. You'd also learn that fire isn't just warmth or theater. It's an accountant. It compounds value. With fire, tough plants become dinner, parasites become smoke, Hard seeds give up their calories, and your jawline no longer has to be a millstone. Fire shifts the math of survival so heavily that the night watch stops feeling like a chore and starts feeling like the bank guard for tomorrow's meal. You protect embers because embers protect you from starving on a wet day when nothing else cooperates. And yes, the hero posters lie. Large animals are bonuses, festivals, seasonal jackpots. You do not chase them daily unless you enjoy returning empty-handed and slightly trampled. More often, you and yours live on the steady drumbeat: roots, greens, nuts, fish, hares, birds, shellfish, things that don't require a parade when you bring them home. The big carcass, when it happens, is a logistical crisis: butchery, transport, preservation, and a chorus of who gets what that makes modern office politics look polite. You'd discover, slowly, that sharing isn't charity, it's insurance. When the day smiles on you, you hand around portions because tomorrow it may frown, and you'd like the favor returned. This is how a band eats through droughts and floods, not by being superhuman, but by being super social. The distribution smooths out the wild swings of luck. If you want a high-yield strategy in a world that laughs at plans, it's called us. Seasons conduct the orchestra. When the rains turn the world generous, you gather like you're being timed because you are. When cold thins the options, you lean harder on fish, stored fat, smoked strips, whatever you tucked away in better weeks. Altitude, coastline, all of them. Edit your menu, but the rule remains. You go where the energy is, not where the drama is. The joke, of course, is that the energy is often hiding under dirt, while the drama is galloping across a plain waving its horns. And labor, flexible. Some days, you dig with the women and laugh at roots that pretend to be rocks. Other days, you track with the men and pretend you're not thinking about those same roots. Kids trail along, turning games into future competence, carrying tiny baskets like apprentices to the planet. Elders advise roots, remember masked years, and veto bad ideas with a look. Your little world runs on knowledge the way your body runs on fat stored, shared, burned cleanly when needed. So, no, the daily story isn't hunt or die. It's spend wisely, eat constantly, burn nothing you can bank. That's the hum beneath every step. Hunting, fire, fear, and the arithmetic that keeps you alive without ever asking permission from luck. And once you've absorbed that music, you'll feel the next beat coming, the practical choreography of how to split a camp into moving parts without losing anyone or anything important. And that choreography, it looks simple until you try doing it with cold fingers, a rumbling stomach, and a landscape that hides its calories like a bored trickster. You'd stand in a circle as the light strengthens, everyone half whispering plans, and the camp divides like a cell, a small party toward the marsh. One up the slope for nuts, another skirting the thorn scrub for hares and birds. No one calls it logistics, but that's what it is: roots, rolls, and quiet contingencies, all stitched together so the band eats today without starving tomorrow. You wouldn't see rigid job titles, you'd see a moving braid. Yes, many days the women lead the root and fruit patrols because hands that know plants, like relatives, can turn a barren patch into lunch. But you'd also watch them flick a throwing stick cleanly at a partridge, or set a snare with the same economy you use to send a text. Men track and sometimes bring down bigger game, sure, but they also gather greens, dig tubers, carry babies, and gossip like the Bluetooth of the savannah. Roles flex with weather, season, pregnancy, injuries, and who slept badly because a jackal wouldn't shut up. You'd head out light, with heavy intentions, a digging stick polished by 100 days, a woven basket that used to be a mat, a sling for the toddler, and a coil of cordage that solves more problems than most inventions that came later. If you're carrying fire, it rides in a bark bundle, smoldering like a secret, because even a short rain can turn your world to raw and cold. The group spreads to see more, then pulls back to signal safely. Hand signs handle most of it. Stop, listen, snake. Yes, no, you're stepping on tomorrow's dinner. The real map isn't in your hands, it's in your head. You know where the tubers fatten after 2 days of rain, which anthills hide edible larvae, which shrubs lie about being harmless until you roast them into decency. You read microhabitats like chapter headings, shade lines, soil color, the gossip of birds, and you pace yourself. The goal is return rate, not heroics. The joke, which everyone knows and no one tells, is that foraging is just accounting with mud under your nails. Children trail at safe distances, practicing the serious game of pretending. They throw at imaginary hares, copy your posture when you freeze to listen, memorize the difference between footprints that end well and footprints that end with someone getting lectured for hours. Small wins are celebrated: 3 fat grubs, a handful of berries, a frog unlucky enough to be near your patient hands. Elders do fewer kilometers and more editing. Not that route, unless you enjoy revisiting last night's dinner. Their veto carries the kind of authority only earned by not dying for decades. Some places and times have partners you didn't exactly hire. In a few regions, a bird might scold you toward honey. In others, dogs latecomers to the human storypad along and pretend they weren't the ones who ate your last scrap yesterday. Cooperation is opportunistic and unspecific. If it works, it stays. If it wastes energy, it's gone by next season. No committee meeting required. By midday, the baskets begin to speak in weight. You've got bulbs that will soften over coals, nuts promising oil, a wriggling problem tied neatly at the ankles, and plants you'll slice thin and dry against tomorrow's indifference. You cache a little near a landmark, a forked branch, a scarred rockbee, cause walking everything back now would cost more than it pays. Risk is managed by distance, timing, and the quiet knowledge that fear wastes glucose faster than running. On the way home, you pass the low, trampled place where antelope cut across the slope. Someone kneels, touches the bent grass, and every neck tilts as if the wind itself is holding its breath. The camp's choreography pauses. Another dance begins, the careful geometry of approach, the hush that lives between heartbeat and footfall, the part where logistics hand the baton to something older and more dangerous. You hold your breath because your breath is noisy, and everything you want to eat owns a better nose than you do. The grass hums with insects. A bird clicks once, twice, and the whole party freezes like you practiced. Wind first, always wind. You keep it in your face, because if it swings around and carries you, the antelope will be halfway to the next valley before you've finished feeling foolish. Tracking is less romance than arithmetic. The angle of a hoofprint, the crumble at its edges, the sheen of a fresh scrape on bark. You read droppings like weatherwarm, cool, scattered, each a sentence about distance and time that never lies to flatter you. No one's sprinting is for when the plan fails. The smart play is ambush, built out of patience. A pair circle wide to where the trail pinches between thorn and rock. Another eases down to a water hollow because thirst betrays even the wary. Your hands speak. Stop, wait, left. A flanker snaps a twig on purpose to drift the herd a few paces into the narrow sass, into the geometry you all agreed on without saying a word. When it works, it feels like magic. It isn't. It's rehearsal, wind, and not getting greedy. Drives are a bigger ask and a rarer pleasure. In some seasons you'll stack brush into a long, shallow V, post people along the arms, and ease animals toward nets or a kill zone. It's tiring, loud work with no guarantee, which is why you don't do it every Thursday like a hobby. Pits, sometimes, where soil and labor say yes. Deadfalls and snares more often, because gravity is an excellent hunter if you tie it to a good trigger. Your tools change the rules. Earlier in the story, it's thrusting spears and thrown spears, risky, personal. Later, a spear thrower adds leverage to your arm and turns almost into close enough. Later still, in some places, bows arrive like quiet geometry, force stored in wood, released into a line that doesn't forgive drift. Stone edges ride at the business end, flecked hafted with resins and sinew you prepared by firelight. Bone and antler do their own honest work. You carry a club because the world is not impressed by gear lists. Yes, there are days and habitats where you choose the noon road and chase in heat, letting an antelope's cooling system betray it. Persistence hunting works when sun, space, and stamina say so. It is a specialized hymn, not the daily chorus. Most days you hunt like a chess player who respects hooves. Small game anchors the ledger. Birds flushed with a line of beaters, hares that zig until they don't. A quick throw that lands because your shoulder has repeated that motion since childhood. Snares hum quietly along runways while you're elsewhere being dramatic. Fish and eels listen to weirs and baskets better than they listen to speeches. Dogs, in later chapters of Prehistory, pad the edges of your visionoses on loan, alarms that don't sleep through their shift, partners who make you look clever. In other regions, a honey guide scolds you towards sweetness. Imitation calls bring curious birds a step too near. None of it is mystical. It's cooperation born of mutual convenience, retained because it pays. When an animal falls, you move with equal parts joy and caution. Others want what you want. Lions with opinions, hyenas with paperwork, vultures conducting audits from the sky. Field dressing starts fast, because weight is a tax and heat is a thief. High-value fat and organs don't wait. Marrow waits a little. The rest depends on distance, hands, and time. Already, you're thinking in fire, sear, smoke, render, harden verbs that turn risk into something you can chew, and tomorrow into something you can trust. Because every hunt, whether an ambush whispered to the wind or a net line that finally sang, ends in the same small, stubborn miracle: flame meeting flesh, wood gas turning bitter roots into food, glue softening to set a new point for the next try. You count coup with calories, not stories, and the ledger closes at the hearth, where light pushes back the teeth at the edge of camp, and work becomes warmth. Fire isn't just warmth, it's the moment the world starts negotiating with you. Lean closer to that glow and you'd learn quickly that flame is a translator turning roots that hate your teeth into food that forgives your jaw, turning meat that plots against your intestines into something you can trust. With heat, stubborn starches loosen, proteins curl into submission, parasites wave the white flag, and suddenly you're getting more out than you put in. That's the math that lets a body walk farther tomorrow. It's also the reason everyone treats embers like a tiny, hissing royalty. You don't have fire. You manage it, flatter it, and carry it like a scandal you can't afford to lose. Cooking is the headliner, sure, but the side acts keep the band alive. Smoke dries strips of meat and hides, chases biting insects just far enough to make conversation possible, and seasons the air with that permanent perfume called "We Don't Die Today." A good hearth stretches day into night without asking your circadian rhythm's opinion. In its circle you stitch, scrape, retouch, teach, and lie beautifully about the size of the fish you nearly caught. The heat isn't free though. Eyes sting, hair singes, and a stray spark reminds you that skin is flammable. Children learn a sacred geometry. This close is comfort, that close is a lesson. You wouldn't rebuild a fire every morning if you could help it. You'd nurse yesterday's coals under ash, coax them with breath, tuck them into bark or fungus to smolder as you travel insurance against rain, with opinions. A live ember is a savings account. A cold hearth is bankruptcy with chattering teeth. Where stones are handy, you'd ring a pit. Where they aren't, you'd learn airflow by feel. Feed from the windward side. Shield the leeward. Keep kindling honest. Never stack wood like you hate oxygen. A wet day turns everyone into a pyromancer peeling damp bark to the dry heart, shaving feathers of wood, muttering at tinder like it owes you money. Fire widens what tools can be. Heat straightens a stubborn shaft, hardens a wooden point until it bites back, softens resin or bitumen into glue so a stone edge and a stick can finally stop pretending they're not married. You'd stir pitch with a twig, lash on with sinew, and set the bond near knot in the flame, because glue behaves like a diva. Too cold, it sulks. Too hot, it runs. Later, you might even learn that certain stones become better after a delicate roast heat-treated. Their edges flake cleaner, sharper, meaner. The hearth is a workshop that happens to keep your toes attached. It's a lighthouse too. Predators respect it, the way sensible people respect cliffs. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but enough that the dark beyond seems to hesitate at the line where sparks die. You'd learn which woods throw coals, which spit, which crackle so loudly they audition danger when none is present. You'd bank the fire before sleep. Assign a watcher who dozes with one ear tuned to the pop of burning sap and the other to the silence that sounds wrong. In the hush, fear and flame negotiate boundaries. You stay there, we live here. The social map of camp is drawn in ash. Hearths anchor where people sit, where tools get dropped, where gossip flows. Elders sidle into the warmest, least smoky angle by unspoken treaty. Kids orbit with questions. Why does wood burn? Why does water sizzle? Why can we see stars through smoke? You answer in stories because chemistry lectures don't keep hands away from coals. And the stories work because nothing persuades like a tale told by flickerlight that smells like dinner. Of course, fire takes as much as it gives. It eats fuel, demands time, and punishes arrogance. It blackens, sealing rock, leaves a signature the earth remembers long after you move on. Charcoal, reddened soil, cracked stone, fat-splashed bone. Archaeologists will read that record like a diary. You just read the flames and think, not for the first time, that the universe is finally cooperating. By this light, the real craft begins. Hands settle into the old rhythm, a core in one palm, a hammerstone in the other, sinew teased into thread, fibers twisted into cord, bone drilled until it becomes a needle your grandchild will inherit. The fire purrs, the edges sing, and you realize the day isn't done, it's sharpening itself for tomorrow. Tools don't wait for inspiration, they sulk until you fix them. If you'd been this person, you'd spend a suspicious amount of your so-called free time hunched over a stone core, convincing it to give up usable edges instead of tantrums. Knapping isn't random smashing, it's angles and nerve. Strike too high and the flake sulks. Strike too deep and the core laughs and turns into a paperweight. When the blow lands right though, there's that glassy tinker note every camp knows, and a sharp edge skates into the world like a new sentence. You'd learn fast that the tool is often the flake, not the leftover lump. Fresh flakes slice meat, shave wood, and open hides before they've even cooled. Retouch turns good into better. A thumb of antler or a pebble presses tiny bites along the edge, shaping scrapers for hides, denticulates for sawing, points for piercing. Later in the story, pressure flaking refines the line even more. Earlier, soft hammer blows with antler billets do the heavy lifting. The rules are the same across eras: angle, platform, follow-through, and the ancient wisdom of not bleeding on your work. Bone and antler are the polite cousins in your toolkit: less flash, more loyalty. You'd rasp a rib into a scraper that refuses to quit. Carve an antler tine into an awl that makes holes where holes behave. And, in colder chapters of the world, drill and polish true-eyed needles for stitched clothing that keeps skin attached to its owner. Burin's those chisel-edged flax-cut grooves in antler and bone so clean you'll start trusting stone more than some people. Cordage is your invisible infrastructure. Twist bast fibers, nettle, or inner bark into lines that don't brag but hold everything together. Nets, lashings, slings, baskets. Sinew, dried and split, adds a smug strength no plant can quite mimic. Rawhide shrinks as it dries, clamping bindings like a self-tightening promise. Baskets aren't quaint decor, they're mobile stomachs. You weave them tight, patch them when a thorn tells you about hubris, and retire them only when even the have patches. Adhesives turn parts into systems. In many regions, you heat pine resin with a whisper of ash or beeswax. On other coasts, asphaltum answers the call. In old European forests, people cooked birch tar long before anyone wrote about chemistry. Hafting is theatre with rules. Warm the glue till it listens. Set the stone into the split shaft. Bind with sinew. Then flirt the joint near the fire, just long enough to marry everything. Too cool, it sulks. Too hot, it deserts. Every good point on a good shaft is a little counsel that finally agreed. Maintenance never stops. Edges dull because reality is rude. Points snap because bones do not negotiate. So you carry a small world on your belt. A core the size of a fist. A retoucher, thumb worn smooth. A few spare flakes tucked in a hide pouch where they can't bite you. Hammerstones look like ordinary rocks until your hand remembers their balance. Perishable tools, the wooden handles, the fiber bindings rarely survive for archaeologists to admire. You will admire them daily because without them stone is just stone. There's housekeeping in this craft. Grindstones flatten seeds and tubers into something cookable in later agricultural chapters. In hunter-gatherer scenes, they still show up as anvils, as polishers for bone, as the place where 100 small tasks, where a groove the shape of a life. He treats some stone in certain places and periods, and it flakes like a dream. Heat the wrong kind and it explodes like a warning label. You learn which nodules ring, which sulk, which betray you at exactly the worst moment. Instruction is hands, not lectures. Elders seat you at the safe edge of the napping circle, a leather pad over your thigh, a quiet demonstration of how not to open a new mouth in your leg. Kids start on soft stone and broken cores, graduating to please don't embarrass the fire. Every scar on a thumb is a footnote in a textbook. No one writes but everyone reads. And the humor is practical. Keep your edges honest, someone says, meaning resharpen scrapers before hides turn to grief. Replace a point before a hunt turns to a sermon about bad choices. A toolkit is a living thing. You curate it, mend it, swap parts with cousins, bury spares in a cache under a recognizable rock in case of rain, lions, or relatives. Soon enough, the reason for all this fussy brilliance arrives as breath and weight, an animal on the ground, or fish flipping in a basket, or a string of fat bulbs thumped from the earth. Tools earn their keep when flesh meets edge, when marrow asks for a crack just so, when sinew decides it wants to be thread and hide agrees to become shelter, which is where your day tilts from crafting to canniness, from making the gear to using it like you meant to all along. You don't have a carcass, you have a clock. Heat is already negotiating with microbes while you're still catching your breath. So the first rule of usable parts is speed with brains attached. Field dressing opens the body careful slit. No puncturing the gut. Unless you enjoy an education, you can't wash off, and the good bits move first. Tongue, liver, kidneys, heart, high value, high spoilage, eaten soonest because tomorrow is not on their calendar. Fat is the royalty of calorie suet around the kidneys. The thick seams along the back, so you harvest it like treasure, because lean meat fills you and then quietly starves you. Fat keeps the lights on. Bones are banks. You crack long bones at the sweet spot with a hammerstone onto an anvil stone, listening for that hollow note that says marrow is ready to meet your mouth. Marrow doesn't ask for chewing, it asks for gratitude. Later, when time and containers cooperate, you render grease-hot stones dropped into a hide-lined pit or tight basket, the melt rising to the top like a reward. Skim, set, store. Grease keeps meat honest, lamps burning, and tools less sticky with regret. Then there's the big decision, schlep or strip. If the distance is kind and the neighbors have small teeth, you can carry quarters. If not, you reduce the animal to parts the landscape will let you keep: shoulders, hindquarters, backstrap, and that ribbon of fat that makes tomorrow less theoretical. Ribs get trimmed, spinal cords become stringing waiting. Tendons dry into sinew that will later hold your world together. Leg sinew splits into threads that bind points tighter than promises. Intestines, scrubbed and rinsed, become excellent casings or, in some places, containers. Stomachs become travel bottles if you pretend you don't know their resume. Hides are futures markets. While meat cools in shade and smoke, the skin gets attention before it remembers it used to be an animal. You open it clean, scrape it over a beam with a stone scraper until flesh and membrane give up, stretch it on a frame, and introduce it to smoke and brains. The animal came with its own oil supply. How considerate. Brain-tinning turns stiff death into something that bends, breathes, and later laughs at rain after a patient smoking. Miss the timing and you're holding a stiff rug that smells like regret. Fish have their own clock with fewer minutes. You slit, gut, and splay them open on green stick racks over slow smoke, or lay them thinly in wind and sun if flies aren't writing their own menu. Shellfish steam in pits or boil in bark baskets with hot stones. The piles of shells you leave behind, middens will one day be archaeologists' love letters. They'll read your menu centuries from now, from a hill that's really dinner stacked to the sky. Transport is choreography with predators as critics. Vultures spiral like auditors. Hyenas arrive with the paperwork already stamped. You post a watcher, light a smoky fire, move meat by relays to safe shade. If winter is generous, meat freezes into storage. You don't have to guard so closely. Elsewhere, racks and smoke do the work, or pits kept cool and dry. In a few coastlines, people cached food underwater where cold and salt conspired against rot. None of this is a picnic. All of it is insurance. Nothing is a waste unless you are. Scapula becomes scraper. Metapodial becomes awl. A section of rib shapes into a smoother hide. Hooves boil into glue. Even the little bones have opinions about needles if you give them time and abrasion. The place where you work turns into a lesson the ground remembers. Cut marks at muscle attachments. Percussion notches where marrow asked to be freed. Grease-stained soil where rendering splattered joy. Later minds will call it taphonomy. You call it lunch. And yes, there's etiquette. Share because luck rotates, and because dried strips pounded and bound with fat travel better than pride. Salt isn't always on the table, but smoke is, sun is, cold is. You learn which plants ward off insects when laid as bedding over racks. Which woods lend a flavor the camp pretends not to notice but will absolutely complain about if you change it. Preservation is culture as much as chemistry. By the time the sun tilts low, your hands are slick, your tools dulled down to honesty, and the camp smells like competence. Meat hangs where wind can find it. Hide tightens on its frame. Sinew dries in tidy lengths like promises waiting to be kept. You carry home not just calories but stories wrapped in smoke. And everybody's eyes go to the baskets. What did you save? What did you risk? What will we be tomorrow because of what you did today? You carry home not just food but the obligation to make a place where tomorrow can happen without complaining. Camp isn't a dot on a map. It's a negotiation with wind, water, and things that think you look delicious. You'd learn the checklist by heart because the checklist keeps hearts beating. Water close, yes, but not floodplain close. Fuel within reach, but not the kind that requires you to suddenly become a lumberjack. A breeze to sweep smoke, not a gale that steals it. Good drainage underfoot, so the night doesn't turn your bedding into soup. Visibility matters, nice view for you, early warning for predators, romance points for sunsets. Optional. Shelter is what the land allows and your hands can build before weather changes its mind. Rock overhangs and caves when the geology is kind. Brush windbreaks and hide tents when it isn't. Bent sapling frames roofed with mats or skin where trees will donate their ribs. In truly cold chapters, big-boned huts, stitched from the leftovers of giants and draped with hides that remembered winter better than you did. None of it is permanent in the way cities pretend to be. All of it is permanent enough to get you through the next storm. You face the opening leeward of the prevailing wind because smoke has opinions and lungs have limits. Floors get dressed with grasses, leaves, and hides dry, replaceable. Less hospitable to the kind of insects that file complaints at 3 a.m. A shallow trench around the edge keeps rain from discovering your ankles. A scatter of flat stones near the hearth keeps embers from auditioning as wildfires. Your tools develop homes, napping corners here, unless you like flint in your heels. Hide scrape there, cooking there. Kids' chaos staged safely where feet won't wander into blades. Camp is a workflow diagram disguised as scenery. Fire tells you where people sit. You set the main hearth where smoke vents and sparks don't travel. A small side fire dries sinew. Another chars points. A quiet ember bed warms a sleeping infant with less drama. Fuel is everyone's problem, Greenwood argues. Deadwood cooperates. Dung burns when trees keep their distance and you stop pretending you're above it. On wet days you coax the dry from the wet with strips shaved thin as patience. If you have to carry embers, you wrap them in bark or punky wood and walk like you're holding the camp's last good idea. Sanitation isn't glamorous, but glamour has never boiled a parasite. You put latrines downwind and away from water because cause and effect are not rumors. Waste goes where the flies don't visit your dinner. The midden, the neat word for everything we refuse, sits at a distance. One day archaeologists will write poetry about your shells, bones, and broken blades. Tonight you just don't want to trip over them in the dark. Mobility is policy. You move before trash and fleas. Turn your address into a diagnosis. Before the nearest firewood becomes a sprint. Before the local shellfish learns your schedule. The circuit isn't random. It's seasonal and memorized. Berries here when the flies are boring. Fish there when the river sulks into pools. High ground when the flood mutters. Low ground when the wind starts writing insults. Sometimes you return to old camp palimpsests of ash and flake. Familiar stones you cached because you knew your future self would be undercaffeinated and grateful. Group size breathes with the land. Too many people and the district files a scarcity complaint. Too few and your night watch yawns into oblivion. Dogs when they finally appear in the timeline sleep at thresholds and pretend it was their idea. They are alarms, noses, and morale. Storage is opportunistic. Pits lined with bark or basketry in cool soil. Platforms lashed up out of rodent reach. Meat racks that turn sun and smoke into next week. Camp is also a blackboard that erases itself every few weeks. Post holes, trampled floors, ash lenses, chipped stone. These are the chalk marks that say we were here. We did the work. You read them as maintenance. Later minds will call it settlement patterning and publish it. Either way, every stake you drive, every frame you lash, every hearth you rake is a sentence in the long, slow language of not dying. And when the wind drops and the smoke thins to a polite ribbon, the place you built starts speaking back to you. People gravitate to the warm edge. Tools retire to their niches. Children remember they are questions with legs. And the night invites the one technology that always fits in the pack. Memory taught out loud. If you sit, I'll show you how knowledge behaves when it's passed by hand and song rather than paper and wires. How skill turns into gossip. And gossip turns into maps. And maps turn into tomorrow's luck, rehearsed in whispers. You don't get textbooks. You get hands. And those hands speak a dialect older than paper. A grandmother taps a leaf against your wrist. This one bites your guts unless you roast it till it confesses. An uncle kneels over a track and invites silence like a second teacher. See the edges. Crisp means recent. Crumbly means you're late. And the tiny slide of grit says, it turned here when it heard something clumsy. Probably you. Lessons arrive as little spells. Twist the fiber with your thigh, not your temper. Keep the blades bite shallow, or you'll turn a good core into a pretty rock. Breathe near embers like you're making a promise, not a windstorm. Play does the heavy lifting while pretending it isn't exercise. You throw at nothing until nothing starts to look like dinner. You stalk your cousin through grass and learn that knees belong closer to earth if you want birds to forgive you. Tiny snares with dull loops catch exactly 0 animals and one very irritated sibling, who becomes a case study in why real snares sit where feet do, not faces. Practice is a modern word. What you have is an afternoon that suddenly ends with a frog in your hand and everybody clapping like you just negotiated peace. Gossip is the village internet, bandwidth unlimited, privacy non-existent. Around the fire, reputations rise and fall on the strength of who shared marrow last lean week and who accidentally forgot they were carrying the only dry tinder. You learn fast that cooperation isn't a virtue, it's a technology. Generosity buys interest on future hunger, and stinginess is a loan shark with a long memory. The elders don't grade you, they curate you. A nod means keep doing that. A long, slow stare means you've invented a new way to be foolish, and the patent is revoked. Music, it's not a luxury. It's the metronome that keeps scattered people in time. Hands drum wood because wood was asking for it. Feet find a beat that keeps walking honestly. Later in the long story, someone will hollow a bone into a flute and teach air to remember a tune. For now, rhythm is everywhere. The pestering of insects, the pop of sap in the fire, the clack of stones as edges wake up. Songs carry information in disguise. A verse that lists safe plants like cousins at a reunion. A chorus that steps you from creek to ridge by naming the landmarks in order so your feet don't get ideas about creativity. Stories are maps that happen to be entertaining. The cautionary tale about the boy who mocked the river doesn't end well, because rivers don't care about your opinions. The funny story about the woman who tried the shiny berries contains 3 lines of botany and an emergency procedure in case someone repeats her career path. You listen, you laugh, and your nervous system files the footnotes under Do Not Test. Children drift asleep calibrated to the local physics. Cliffs are not negotiable. Snakes are not friendships. The moon will leave. The sun will return. Neither consult you. Teaching is rarely a speech. It's a shared posture. The older pair their pace to the smaller stride and let you walk the answer before they say it. They'll let you misidentify a track if the mistake is cheap and correct you when the price is teeth. Even the why of the sky gets a story. Not because fables replace fact, but because memory eats rhythm more gladly than prose. And woven through all of it is the quiet theater of error. A knuckle earns a new grip. A smoky fire earns a better stack. A long, unproductive day earns the line, everyone knows tomorrow is a tool. The eerie part is how kind the dark becomes when knowledge sits between you and it. A gesture learned at Gnawn 2 fingers. Snake, palm down, stop, hand circling. Listen works just as well by firelight. A little scale you've hummed for years turns feet into a single animal on a night march. You realize the camp has a memory and you're slowly learning to belong to it. And then the older voice, the one with ash in it, leans over the glow and says, "All right. Now, let's talk about the parts of the world that don't love you back, fangs. Cliffs, strangers with more questions than smiles, and how we keep living anyway." You already learned that cooperation is a technology. Now learn its shadow practical. Predators don't sign treaties. Cliffs don't read apologies. And strangers show up with smiles that have footnotes. So you manage risk like a miser counts coins. First rule, visibility beats bravery. Trails curve along ridges where your eyes get there before your ankles. Tall grass at dawn and dusk is just a suggestion box for ambush, and every big cat you'll never meet has voted yes. You talk while you walk, not because you're chatty, but because silence surprises things with teeth. A human voice tells the neighborhood, "We're here, we're many, please direct complaints to the fire." Food invites trouble, so you stop sending engraved invitations. Offal gets dumped far from camp, bones cracked and scattered, racks raised where hyenas have to file appeals with gravity. If a carcass must stay overnight, it sleeps with a smoky guard and a board watcher who's allowed to throw rocks at opinions with whiskers. You stash surplus in pits, in cool rock cracks, sometimes even submerged where cold water keeps secrets. Nothing sits where wind carries its perfume straight to someone else's dinner plans. Water can kill in both directions. You test depth with the staff because rivers love dramatic reveals. Cross where the bottom speaks in stones, not silt. In croc country, you don't kneel. You squat, you scan, you leave. Upstream latrines are a crime. Downstream drinking is a short story with a bad ending. If you've got containers, boil. If you don't, drop hot stones into bark or baskets and pretend you always liked tea that tastes like twig. Fire is a fence you can carry. At night, flames sit between you and the ideas of the dark. Not perfect, nothing is, but most predators prefer employees who don't glow. Watchers rotate. Kids sleep inside the human ring. Dogs, when history finally grants them, take the liminal posts by choice and pretend it was their plan all along. Sparks are audited, fuel stacked high enough to insult weather, and the ember bed is banked like a debt you fully intend to pay. Terrain nags for attention. Loose scree pretends it's a staircase, then sues your knees. Ledges don't do second chances. You probe bogs like they're lying, because they are. You skirt snow bridges because underneath is a sentence about gravity. Shade is strategy, not comfort. Heat kills, slower than a leopard, but with better paperwork. Lightning enjoys tall things and optimists. Both learn to crouch. Strangers are a separate species of risk, managed with choreography older than names. You don't wander into another band's camp like an enthusiastic goat. You stop at the edge where their eyes have already found you. Lay your weapons down where they can see the pointy parts trying to behave, and let your body speak calmly. Open hands, elbows out, no sudden math. Words arrive after posture. Sometimes it's trade shell for stone, for news. Sometimes it's courtship season for alliances that keep gene pools fresh and feuds stale. Sometimes it's mutually agreed avoidance, both sides performing that elaborate dance called, "We are not in the mood to be murdered today." Scouts exist because surprises are expensive. They go light, read the land, and come back with either a new route or an old warning. Smoke columns in the distance become a weather report for humans. Feast, fire, or funeral. Song carries intentions, a friendly line that lists place names, a warning beat you don't mistake for celebration. If contact turns bad, the protocol is unromantic and effective. Disengage, widen, vanish. The land is big, your band is small. Winning is often spelled LEAV. First aid is pragmatic, not mystical. Cuts get rinsed, pressure stops bleeding. Splints are built from sticks and common sense. You know which leaves calm skin and which resins pretend to be clean. Burns earn cool water and patience. Sprains get rest you didn't budget for. Infection is the enemy that doesn't roar. You watch for heat and swelling like accountants watch for missing numbers. A good wrap, a clean bed, and help with the heavy lifting can make the difference between a scar and a story no one finishes. And because you're not superhuman, just exquisitely trained, you pace the day to keep accidents from breeding. Work chunks with breath inside them. No one sprints a whole afternoon. That's how ankles write autobiographies. The band's safety margin is built from small, relentless habits. A colon dancer on the trail. A pause at blind turns. A shared glance before stepping where only fools step twice. Do all that, and the world will still try to collect. But you'll have turned the volume down on chaos, which buys what matters most in this economy. Time for wounds to knit. Food to smoke. Children to practice missing hazards before hazards practice not missing them. And that, inconveniently, carries us to the unglamorous truth, sitting under every heroic painting. The body is both engine and leash. It breaks, it heals, it tires, it resists, and it insists on maintenance whether you scheduled it or not. You were warned. The body is both engine and leash. and it files complaints in triplicate. Let me tell you about the person you could have been: someone who lifts, walks, squats, digs, carries, and then repeats the whole performance because dinner refuses to crawl into the pot. Workload isn't heroic montage, it's intervals. Long walks stitched with short bursts, heavy days answered by lighter ones, all calibrated by weather, season, and how loudly your knees are negotiating. You don't push through a sprain, you adapt the route, because bravado is just fear in a fancy hat. Calories come with invoices. The steady diet plans, fish, small gain pays the bills. The rare feast covers debt and fuels the next gamble. Lean meat without fat is a practical joke. The universe plays on people who don't listen. You'd prize marrow and suet because your liver has limits. Too much protein alone and your gut stages a coup. So yes, you praise fat with a piety. Modern ads reserved for luxury cars. Fire helps scooking up the return on routes and keeping parasites on the wrong side of the smoke butt. It also writes a bill in your lungs. Soot tickles throats, eyes water, and you discover that indoors is a great place to concentrate smoke if you were feeling too healthy. Injuries are an occupational hazard, and the occupation is being alive. Cuts meat, water, pressure, and whatever plant or resin the local grandmothers trust. Splints come from straight sticks and humility. You learn the signs of a wound going sour: heat, swelling, a smell nobody compliments, and you throw everything you know at it because infection doesn't pounce, it creeps. Fractures heal if the village does its job. Carry, feed, guard, and tell good stories until the bone decides to knit. The archaeological record is full of healed breaks. Translation: someone cared, and the patient did not sprint back to heroics. Teeth draft their own tragic poetry. Grit in food, sandpaper's enamel. Stone-ground meals add a bonus crunch you didn't order. Carrots are fewer before agriculture, but not a myth. Honey and starchy tubers are sweet talkers with consequences. You pick fibers from between molars because toothache has no time for dignity. Later, in the long human tale, people drill cavities and survive it, which is either a testament to skill or to the bargaining power of unimaginable pain. Parasites vote early and often. Coprolites, yes, the polite word for ancient pooptail on worms, with no sense of privacy. Life-stage commuting experiments on scalps. Smoke, ash, and grooming circles cut the numbers, not the attitude. Water makes and unmakes health. Clean runs save lives. Stagnant sips give lessons. You boil when you can. When you can't, you choose sources that argue less with your intestines. Disease profiles in small mobile bands aren't the same as in crowded cities. With fewer people and more movement, raging epidemics struggle to get a ticket. You're more likely to wrestle with wounds, gut bugs, parasites, and the slow arithmetic of where joints, complaint spines, and knees, in particular because miles are honest accountants. Entheses, the places where tendons cling to bone show on skeletons, like calluses do on hands. It's not a tragedy. It's a receipt for work done. Then the numbers that scare modern readers. Life expectancy at birth looks low because babies are fragile and the world is rude. But if you thread the needle of childhood, it's not a miracle to see your 4th or 5th decade. Some go further, dragging grandchildren into competence with nothing but a glare. You spot stress in children's teeth lines where the body pauses growth. To pay a fever bill or a famine tax, and you learn the obvious lesson. Sharing is medicine, and stored food is a love letter to your future self. Pain management is pragmatic, not mystical. Cool a burn, strap an ankle, rest a back, chew a bitter bark if the local pharmacopoeia includes it, and avoid drama that starts with "watch this." Rest isn't laziness, it's strategy. You pace the day so one mistake doesn't require 10 rescues. You sleep where smoke, bodies, and embers make a treaty. You wake when someone coughs wrong. Fear still hums at the edges. Predators, cliff strangers, but it's quieter when your kit is sharp. Your group is generous, and your habits are boring in exactly the right ways. And through it all, maintenance masquerades as culture. The songs that pace your steps also regulate your breath. The taboos that keep waste away from water also keep diarrhea out of your storyline. The jokes about whose snare missed are really rules about checking gear before dawn. Health isn't a clinic, it's a choreography. The body will keep dancing if the group keeps time, which is the point where survival stops being a solo and becomes a choir. Because you don't outrun the world on your own, you outlast it together. If you want to see what that looks like up close, follow me toward the cradle of tomorrow. Small hands, many arms, and the old, stubborn magic of people raising people. You step into that cradle of tomorrow and discover the grand secret. One baby, many owners. Humans don't raise children like territorial cats. We raise them like a village that forgot whose turn it was. Alloparenting isn't a buzzword here, it's Tuesday. Mothers carry the heaviest load, yes, but grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, fathers, and even unrelated campmates pass the infant around like a loud, very beloved waterskin. The joke that never gets old. It takes a band to keep a baby from eating the fire. Haha, not a metaphor. Long childhood is the price of that enormous, hungry brain. So the band pays in daily installments: time, food, vigilance. Many anthropologists argue that grandmothers tilt survival odds, and the camp acts as if they've read the paper. Post-reproductive women run kitchens of calm, spot trouble at 50 paces, and invent the schedule no one admits exists. Older siblings are logistics, with legs fetching water, carrying toddlers, herding the fearless away from serpents and into boredom. Fathers provision in varied ways across ecologies. Uncles are famously generous when prestige is on the line. Everybody gets points for showing up with fat. Feeding is both biology and choreography. Infants ride skin to skin and feed on demand, because arguing with a newborn is a hobby for people who enjoy failure. Lactation buys birth spacing months become a calendar of not yet, and mobility. Standards keep interbirth intervals realistic, because sprinting after hares with 2 babies dangling is a slapstick the band won't finance. When weaning looms, cooks stage their quiet revolution. Mash tubers, pound meat into paste, thin porridge with broth, all cooked to turn risk into lunch. The weanlings' dilemma: calories versus microbes gets managed with fire, clean water, and the sort of hand-washing that looks suspiciously like sand and common sense. Carrying systems are engineering disguised as affection. Slings of hide or fiber, hip carries that turn a parent's pelvis into a stool, back rides that free hands for digging sticks and dreams. Co-sleeping is default safety, babies tucked where warmth is highest and hyenas least enterprising. Hearths are banked, not blazing, because toddlers are adorable, fast, and flammable. Sleeping arrangements draw a human ring round the smallest lungs. Night watch includes a subroutine. Listen for coughs that sound wrong. Quiet fussing before it recruits the jackals. Playgroups are the preschool and the internship. Toddlers, shadow foragers, learning routes the way modern children learn passwords. They practice helping until helping sneaks up and becomes real. Carrying kindling, plucking berries, spotting shellfish, scaring birds at the wrong time and, eventually, the right time. Adolescents graduate into the economy, checking snares, netting fish, learning the sacred geometry of don't step there. Instruction is never a lecture when a gesture will do. 2 fingers for a snake, palm down for stop, a small smile for you finally saw it. Health is guarded collectively, because illness steals calories from everyone. A fevered child earns extra wood at the hearth. Softer food, more watchful eyes. Splints are straight sticks and patience. Smoke deters insects as much as it annoys eyes. Grooming circles harvest lice because fear of predators is rational, but fear of parasites is efficient. When the camp moves, children walk as far as legs allow and ride when they don't. Trade carrying across hips and shoulders in a relay that makes distance look negotiable. Discipline wears the face of humor and boundaries. Taboos keep little hands from sacred tools and dirty water. Stories keep them from cliffs without filing the paperwork called trauma. The band doesn't invent quality time, it invents time. Full stop hours braided with chores, songs, and those slow, sleepy instructions that turn hunting, fire, and fear into skills instead of ghosts. And because the universe loves irony, children are expensive and profitable at once. They absorb labor for years, then start paying dividends in eyes, hands, laughter, and late-night ember attending. That's the human cheat code. We front-load teaching so tomorrow arrives slightly less stupid, which is why, when the dry season stretches, faces thin, and the rivers speak in pebbles, you notice something subtle at the edge of camprite shells, strange stones, a packet of red earth from faraway signs that your little band doesn't live on an island of its own making. You thought your camp was the whole world, until the world showed up in someone's pouch. Bright shells from a coast you can't smell. A blade whose sparkle says born of a mountain you've never seen. A packet of red earth so fine it stains the fingers like a promise. These are postcards without writing. Let me tell you about the person you could have been. A specialist in recognizing elsewhere. Your eyes weigh an object and ask the only question that matters: who carried you here, and what did it cost them? Trade isn't a marketplace with shouting. It's a web spun out of favors, marriages, and the kind of gossip that walks faster than feet. Bands meet where the land says enough for many. Salmon runs, caribou crossings, good flint outcrops, broad beaches that serve as both pantry and plaza. You arrive lean from the road and leave heavier, a handful of obsidian that flakes like glass, a sting of salt on your lips from dried fish swapped to handshakes back, a necklace of shells that once kept time with the tide. Rivers and coasts are the original highways, ridgelines are their switchbacks. Memory is the only map you need, until someone forgets and learns the lesson twice. What moves is both practical and pretty. Stone matters, good flint, chert, obsidian because a better edge is a louder yes to tomorrow. Pigments move to iron-rich, ochres in shades from rust to blood. Manganese that makes black so deep it looks like night. Chalk that draws the bones of animals you'll never catch alone. Later in the story, amber wanders inland and green rocks for axes develop reputations. Earlier, teeth and shells become beads that say these are my people in a grammar older than flags. Distance adds glamour. Non-local goods glow with the subtle magic of I have friends far away. But objects are just the receipts. What you really exchange is risk. When drought stomps your valley flat, friends are priva host you because last winter you didn't arrive empty-handed. When tempers flare between cousins who've been counting insults, marriages stitch the wound shut with babies and shared obligations. News moves with the goods where herds shifted, which water spoiled. Who quarreled with whom, and thus which paths to avoid, if you like your blood where it is. Techniques travel, to a new way to notch a point, a different glue recipe that doesn't sulk in the rain. A song that lists a chain of springs in the right order so even the timid can walk the dry country. None of it looks like a ceremony until you notice how carefully everyone is pretending to be casual. Weapons are set down where edges point at nothing. Greetings float at the exact distance where you can step back without looking silly. The first gifts are small food, pigment, a pretty pebble to see if hands shake or settle. Reciprocity keeps score with an abacus made of memory. You overpay today on purpose. Next season you collect in safety, not interest. Archaeologists will one day read the ledger you're writing by accident. They'll trace obsidian to its volcanic birthplace and mutter about kilometers. They'll find marine shells far inland and draw arrows on maps. They'll match the chemistry of ochre to the hill it came from and publish quietly astonished paragraphs. You don't need the footnotes. You can feel the net around you each time a stranger's bead catches the fire, and every head nods because it understands that a small thing walked a long way in many hands. Aggregation has its own weather. Nights get louder drums, laughter, the soft diplomacy of courtship, and days hum with workshops. A ring of nappers turning raw stone into futures. A circle of women trading recipes for roots that lie. Elders swapping roots like card tricks. Children vanishing into gangs that will one day be alliances. Good meetings leave you richer in stories and poorer in sleep. Bad meetings leave you walking early with your weapon in your hand and your mouth full of silence. And tucked inside the give and take is a quieter traffic, meaning those beads aren't just pretty, they say who you are. That red earth doesn't only color skin, it turns bodies into declarations of season, of status, of grief. The moment you hold pigment that came from a place you've never stood, you're halfway to drawing a line that says we were here, halfway to marking a rock so the land remembers your face. Which is to say, the next thing in your hands is not a tool or a good trade, at all it's a sign. So you've got red earth from far away in your palm, and your fingers already know what your mouth doesn't. This isn't just color, it's permission. You grind the ochre on a flat stone with the same care you give marrowat a slick of fat. A little spit, if the day is stingy, and suddenly the world takes marks that don't wash off in the first rain. Congratulations, you've invented graphic design with mud and stubbornness. Iron oxides make reds from rust to wine. Manganese gives a black that sulks beautifully. Charcoal is the old, reliable, that never complains about supply chains. You smear, stipple blow through a hollow reed. A hand pressed to rock and haloed with pigment becomes both selfie and census. I was here, and so were we. If you'd been this person, you wouldn't pretend you knew exactly what everything meant. You'd just know meaning was the point. Blombo's folk, way down the timeline, carved cross-hatched ochre and strung shell beads long before hashtags were cool. Farther north and much later, Lascaux and Chauvet hid horses and aurochs in chambers where daylight never audited. On a different ocean, Sulawesi palms bloomed on limestone like ghostly roll calls. The technique is consistent. Bind pigment in fat or water, blow or dab. Trace with fingers that already understand edges because they make edges for a living. Portable signs walk with you, beads of shell and teeth, ostrich shell discs. The round-bellied figurines that ride pouches and pockets through ice and memory. Cave walls hold the heavy songs. Your body wears the chorus. Ochre does more than preach. It dries, hides nicer, sticks to glue like it pays rent. Probably helps as a bug and sun argument in some places. And, when mixed with plant oils, stays on skin long enough to make a point. You line cuts with it because clean is a color as well as a concept. You stripe bones and beads because contrast is a grammar even ravens respect. When you store red earth in a carved bone tube and carry it miles, you've quietly admitted what everyone in camp already suspects. Some materials are not just useful, they're persuasive. Ritual spaces aren't churches with roofs. They're places where behavior changes its posture. Sometimes that's a deep cave where soot crowns the ceiling and torchlight flickers the animals into motion. Sometimes it's an exposed boulder where cupules pock the surface from centuries of tapping, a patient drumline played in stone. Sometimes it's a ring of posts or stones on an open ridge, late in the story, where the horizon agrees to stand still long enough for people to measure their grief and their harvest in circles. You'll notice the choreography, feet clean before entering, voices lowered without instruction, food left in portions no one eats, bones arranged like sentences. Structured deposits are just offerings with better filing. Sound matters more than you expect. A clap in a cavern answers back with a low animal the rock keeps trapped. A chant leans on an echo and stands up straighter. Smoke writes black vowels on the roof. Calcite drips punctuate. Children stare until staring turns to stillness, because even they can tell the atmosphere has policies. You don't name it sacred because that's not your vocabulary. You call it the place where you don't joke as loudly. Burials, when they happen with intention, announce themselves by labor. Bodies are laid with beads counted in weeks of work. Ochre storms, the bones red. Tools and ornaments keep company with the quiet. Elsewhere, and otherwise, the dead rest more practically. Exposure, distance, minimal fuss because lives are finite and time is rude. Either way, stones remember. Archaeologists will say deliberate interment and grave goods. You say we did what we could and walk back to the living because they're hungrier and more demanding. Every mark risks being misunderstood 3 valleys away and 10,000 years later, and that's fine. The point of symbols isn't to survive grading. It's to tighten the knot between bodies in a world that keeps trying to pull them apart. Paint the skin and you see your people in a crowd. Notch the stick and you remember a moon. Dot the wall and a path returns next season because you wrote it where water can't eat it. And when the last reed runs dry and the last torch smoke curls into the roof like a tired serpent, the day folds back into the only ritual that never disappoints. Warmth. Faces hum of tools at the edge of sleep. You'll settle by the ember's heart, look up past smoke at a sky so boldly honest it feels like a reprimand, and start the small ceremony that every band knows by other names, counting what's left, plotting the next move, and whispering promises you intend to keep before the light returns. The day doesn't end, it cools. Smoke thins to a ribbon, talk drops into that soft register people use when they're full and almost honest, and the fire becomes a metronome for eyelids. You'd sit where the heat is civilized, tools within reach, meet a polite distance upwind, and you'd feel the camp do that slow, vertebra by vertebra exhale. If you'd been this person, you'd learn that darkness is not an enemy. It's a contracture noise for its teeth, your light for its caution. Night work is small and precise. A dull scraper remembers its edge under a reed wetcher. Sinew teases into threads that behave. A point gets tried because tomorrow deserves sharp things. Someone mends a basket with a patience that would shame saints. Someone else rubs fat into a drying hide so it decides to be a cloak instead of a board. None of it looks dramatic, which is why it saves more lives than the dramatic parts. Children collapse like fallen tents. then jolt back up to ask a single cosmological question about why sparks fly. You answer with science disguised as fable. Wood is old sunlight. The tree stored a summer, and the fire is returning it to the sky. Works every time. Elders drift into stories that are maps, wearing costumes this ridge before the storm. That spring when the fish arrived, fat and smug. The year the berries pretended not to exist. The beats are familiar because remembering is a group sport, and repetition is the only subscription anyone pays for. Watchers rotate. 2 adults and, if the timeline allows it, a dog with opinions circle the perimeter. Listening to the arguments of insects and the long, low punctuation of things that weigh more than you want to meet. Firelight doesn't make you invisible. It just throws a line on the ground that many predators would rather not cross. Fuel stacks close. Sparks are disciplined, and embers get banked under ash, because tomorrow is much easier when it starts warm. Sleep arrives in honest chunks, tied to temperature and light, not calendars. You doze, wake to feed the fire, roll, listen, drift again. Nobody names it segmented sleep. They call it being alive with responsibilities. On cold nights, bodies stacked like polite logs. On hot ones, everyone breathes a little further apart and pretends not to mind. The Milky Way is a river that refuses to be useful. But the moon has manners. Its phases pace shellfish. Its brightness paces night walks, and its absence reminds you that darkness has grades. Planning happens in the quiet between yawns. Tomorrow is sketched in verbs. Check snares by the cut bank. Split the marsh party from the ridge party. Test the new route around the wasp trees. Move camp if the firewood argues again. Decisions fold in the arithmetic you've practiced all day. Return rates, legs available, weathers, mood, gossip from a cousin who noticed the antelope's track bending toward the old salt lick. Someone suggests a drive next week, not because bravery is fashionable, but because the smokehouse racks look smugly empty. You use the sky for timing, not poetry. Stars you don't name still tell you when dawn is plotting. A thin line of cold sneaks under someone's blanket, and the whole ring shifts, choreographed by muscle memory. A cough no one likes gets noted. A blister earns a shorter route. The last talk before sleep is always logistics disguised as banter. Who carries embers, who walks tail, who is forbidden from telling jokes until the fish traps are checked. Fear never leaves. It just becomes information. The hyena's laugh registers as distance and direction. An owl's wing is a boundary you don't cross without a stick. The night smells different when cats are near the dog. If you have one, edits the edges of camp with a low sentence. None of this is magic. It's attention, accrued and compounded, paying interest in quiet heartbeats. Eventually, the fire turns to a red idea. The stories lose their endings, and the camp becomes a low chorus of breath. Somewhere, a watcher corners sleep against a tree and blinks it away with another armload of wood. Earth ticks under you. The night keeps its half of the contract. And then the eastern sky lifts an eyebrow, and there it is, again the oldest punchline in human history. Dawn sharpened its teeth, hunger clearing its throat. The ledger opens to the first page. A circle of stones, a blush of coals, and a campsite becomes a tiny city with rules. The hearth isn't just warmth, it's infrastructure, the line that powers work, light, and watchfulness. Ash builds up like pale moons. Fire-cracked stone keeps its minutes. Smoke writes on ceilings. Archaeologists read those signatures like ledgers. Families once read them like weather. Maintenance is a daily hymn. Coals get banked under ash to last the cold hours. A good firekeeper learns the line between coddling and smothering, between decent fuel and drama. Where trees are stingy, dung obliges. Where forests lean in, armfuls of deadwood arrive before dusk so no one forages under stars. Rake, feed low, ring the pit with stones, so one ambitious ember doesn't audition as a wildfire. Cooking makes the flame pay rent. Roots surrender to sweetness. Meat becomes negotiable. Parasites retire. Stone boiling in hide-lined pits keeps stews alive where pottery is a rumor. Flat slabs beside coals turn into accidental griddles perfected by hunger. Smoke threads the recipes, part preservative, part perfume, part mosquito diplomacy. The hearth is a workshop as much as a kitchen. Pitch warms into glue, sinew softens and shrinks into vows, wood points toughen in the glow. Flint wakes under a hammerstone and litters clean edges into a waiting hide scrap. Even the failure's first strikes that crack a core into sulking lumps are saved for other uses. It is also a fence drawn in light. Predators haven't signed the treaty, but many argue from a distance. Low flames hold their ground. High flames choke the camp. So the night watch tends a quiet glow and listens for the grammar of the dark. A leopard's far cough, a startled bird, wind sifting thorn. A stirred coal is a line drawn between inside and out. Space organizes around the fire as planets around a sun. Tools settle in arcs, with stacks out of spark range. Sleeping hides learn the warm draft, but not the ember path. Elders angle toward the least smoky seat, as if by law. Stories arrive as jokes and leave as protocol. Don't lay green wood unless mosquitoes pay taxes first. Don't step across the cooking stones unless you want the day to start again. Ash has afterlives, insulating ember bundles, TAMING sticky glue, drying floors. Long after the fire dies, the pale ring invites strangers with trowels to kneel and whisper how a family edited darkness into something livable. But fires don't keep themselves, and dinners don't stroll in. Outside the glow, a ledger waits. Calories go out, calories come in, and margins can be cruel. Families choose tasks that pay often, tubers that yield to digging and roasting. Shellfish obedient to tides, fish to weirs, baskets and nerves. Small game that doesn't insist on a speech before it becomes soup. Big hunts happen, but they're festivals with logistics, not routine. Day to day, enough hums on plants, fish, birds, rabbits, and patience. The trick isn't bravery, it's return rate. Each hour must bring back more than it burns, plus a tip for the drama that arrives uninvited. Digging sticks pry out starch swollen by rain. Nuts drop on cue and sulk the rest of the year. Berry patches give until birds file complaints. Even insects qualify fat in small packages for eyes trained to love the underside of things. Heat sweetens the deal, pulling more from what's gathered and putting parasites out of work. Variance is the menace. One day explodes with luck, the next writes about empty hands. The oldest insurance is sharing. Households braid fortunes, so pots don't swing from famine to feast. Tonight's fish spreads, tomorrow's marrow returns. It isn't charity and isn't chaos. Reputation enforces it, jokes nudge it, eyes audit it. Public distribution keeps egos nervous and bellies steady. Meat arrives with shouts, then rules take over. Elders get comfort, nursing mothers quiet priority. Successful hunters lose their shot at hoarding because the animal is already everybody's story. Prestige travels one way, the portions another. Stored effort moves to dried strips, smoked fish, cracked nuts, rendered fat hop from hearth to hearth like polite messengers. Caches mark roots under a forked branch, inside a hollow tree savings account without a mint. Trade follows the same paths, salt for stone, shells for stories, for news. Costs are counted in feet as well as food. Carrying water or meat isn't free. Tomorrow's stride will say so. So plans bend toward transport, butcher in shade and carry only what lasts. Pick patches along a loop, you'll walk anyway. Time tides so the beach delivers itself. Even the path home is a budget shade if possible. Downhill if lucky. Conversation to keep the pace human. Lean months don't break the rule, they clarify it. The sea gives when inland plants sulk. Roots hide calories while leaves give up. Trapped pools hold fish that forgot. Families lean on predictables, on songs that remember, and on one another. A lone household is a stomach attached to worry. A net of givers is where the proof. If the ledger still reddens, swagger isn't the cure. More eyes, more hands, more ways to turn landscape into lunch so work rearranges itself. Tasks slide between people, tools change hands, roots reweave, and the day pays its bills without demanding blood. The choreography looks casual until you notice each step knows where the next must land. Jobs sort by skill, season, and knees, not slogans. Patterns exist. More men chase large, fast problems with points. More women harvest roots, seeds, shellfish, and small game with patient tools, but the world ignores diagrams. Women spearfish, run net drives, set snares, drop birds with stones. Men gather greens when storks shout and berries brag. Adolescents drift where useful runners, water carriers, beaters for birds. Elders sit out the hardest miles and edit plans with an eyebrow. Tasks aren't birthrights, they're weather reports. After rain, everyone is a botanist with a shovel. With low tides, everyone grows gills and baskets. In the dry, fish traps fence shrinking pools. Pregnancy and nursing bend roots and loads. An injury turns a hunter into today's craftsman and tomorrow's storyteller. The landscape sets the menu, buddies negotiate the seating chart. Crews splinter and recombine. Diggers fanning with sticks and woven carriers. Lines easing fish into wicker. Flipping stones for crayfish. Setting weirs where currents are bossy but not rude. Bird drives born of hand signs and a shared sense of now. Farther out, trackers ghost. Trail spears, hotlots. Later bows while a pair scouts the return route because nothing ruins. A feast like discovering it's uphill both ways with a ribcage on your shoulders. Gear migrates like people. A sling goes to the shoulder that behaves today. Retouched scrapers rotate to whoever drew the stubborn hide. Cordage coils multiply because some problems beg to be tied to something that will embarrass them. Embers ride in bark with the cautious walker who never trips and always notices when the wind changes its mind. Children trail safer crews and turn games into muscle memory. Silence becomes a habit, not a performance. Small hands learn the twist that makes rope. Small feet learn the difference between soil that lies and soil that swallows. Reputation oils the machine. The forager who brings bulk and doesn't brag is beloved. The hunter who lands a miracle and sulks when portions fly outward learns that prestige and possession are not synonyms. The chronic water dodger discovers jokes can be hearings with punchlines. Cooperation isn't kindness, it's a maintained tool. When the day throws a curve storm, injury, a cat with ideas division, snaps into new shapes. Extra hands, guard racks. Quiet feet shadow the edge. Someone rebuilds the firebreak where sparks try to experiment. The improv repeats often enough to become law. At the center sits the force that turns starch into sugar, glue into marriage, a risky diet into a generous one. Heat, managed well, it multiplies effort and softens lean days. A fire that only warms is a pet. A fire that cooks is a partner. Tubers resign after a slow roast. Hard seeds loosen when parched. Meat hisses its parasites out. Starch granules swell. Proteins fold. Chewing time drops. Calories rise. Less glamour, more leverage. Techniques multiply. Earth ovens. A stone-lined pit. A slow bonfire. Meat swaddled in leaves and buried to tender while the day minds other business. Stone boiling makes soups without pots. Red hot rocks cycled through hide or bark until water talks. Leafy packets steam. Flat stones bake seed cakes that pretend not to be proud. Some plants require ceremony. Acorns bleed bitterness with repeated rinses. Certain roots behave only after long baking. Alkaline washes tame tannins. These aren't theories, they're scars turned into muscle memory. Smoke works double, flavor and future. Thin blue threads carry phenols and dryness and friendly to the small saboteurs that turn plenty into misery. Fish split and pinned above a slow haze keep their dignity. Meat sliced thin, salted when luck allows, smoked till dark becomes weatherproof food. The smell gets into hair, hides, and arguments sand into next month. Fat becomes serious, rendered in trays or stone-boiled. Grease rises and is skimmed. Cooled, it packs calories tight, lights lamps, kinder than torches, softens glue, rescues diets from rabbit starvation. Bone grease, coaxed from crushed cancellous bone with long simmering, is arithmetic. More energy per carry, more meals per storm. Metals are absent, chemistry isn't. Pitch softens to weld stone to shaft, points toughen over coals. Green sticks, steam bend, mineral paint warms and flows as a stubborn sign. Heat-treating stone, done carefully, makes flakes cleaner, sharper. Around the rim, tools are revised the way sentences are, and dinner shares the same editor. Commensality leans in, a pot literal, simulated, or earthen invites many hands. Small portions become one large thing, and that becomes many small mouths, satisfied at once. Distribution is visible and negotiable. A ladle is a political device. The server knows who hunted, who carried, who watched, who is nursing the future. Fairness is an ingredient. The hearth enforces it with the tyranny of everyone watching. Cooking buys time, which buys options. Dried strips pounded and stitched with fat become whenever, not today. Roasted tubers keep to sunrise. Parched seeds don't sprout in the bag. Even the broth are savory goskets, cooled and saved. Waste is just future food disrespected. But tomorrow I need a seat. Racks and pits are promises. Fulfilling them requires shade, air, and secrecy. Plenty is fragile. It needs a cool place to hide. Drying is the simplest conspiracy. Meat sliced thin and leaned into smoke and wind. Fish split and pinned. Shellfish turned to hard chips. Seeds and nuts parched until the sprout impulse retires. Tubers roasted, then aired. When the air sulks, the earth volunteers. Pits become pantries shallow for quick use, bell-shaped for longer beds lined with bark, grass, mats, or a once opinionated skin. Cool darkness calms, heats tantrums. Lids matter. Some pits live inside shelters under watchful eyes. Others hide just beyond the gossip. Cold collaborates where winter has teeth. Drifts freeze meat into time capsules. Snow pits layer grass and flesh. Subfloor caches act as honest refrigerators. Fat hardens. Marrow keeps its secrets. Fat gets special treatment because energy is heavy and irresistible. Rendered grease goes into skin bags, stomachs, or tight baskets corked with pitch. Cooled, it seals oxygen out. Dried meat pounded to fiber marries fat into bricks that travel like good intentions. Bone grease joins the reserve. The smell is modest, the calories are not. Insects and rodents apply for work. Ash dusted over layers deters tiny legs. Racks rise on poles with slick collars. Stores hang where rats grow polite. In damp seasons, smokers hum all day. For specialist thieves, hyenas with leisure. Wolverines with crowbars in their souls. Cash placement becomes art, tucked in thorn, wedged in rock, hidden where scent eddies and dies. Mobility prefers memory to walls. Families leave food along habitual paths under a distinctive fork in a red-stoned crevice, behind a boulder pretending to be an animal. Ethics matter. Signals evolve so friends understand and opportunists don't. Storage is technical and political. Who opens which bag? Which pit feeds whose children when storms erase schedules? How much secrecy protects trust before it starves it? Answers live between fires, where fairness earns interest and stinginess is remembered longer than winter. Meat doesn't arrive as property. It arrives as a problem, heavy, perishable, loud with scent. A hide is spread, a blade whetted, and policy begins. First cuts go where argument is thin. Elders with low reserves, nursing mothers who turn food into people. Bowls queue in a crescent shells, folded leaves, cupped hands. Ownership is complicated on purpose. The thrower glows, but hoarding is refused. Sometimes the deciding token is a loaned point or shaft. Sometimes a designated distributor carves to prevent luck from becoming tyranny. A successful day buys prestige and obligations in the same breath. Sharon pulls the teeth of variance. Visible distribution smooths feast-famine curves. Today's rib reaches the hearth that offered fish yesterday. Fat travels as a promise, tipped into thin soups where lean meat pretends. Dried strips snap in front of many eyes and disappear into many hands. Fairness has enforcement without uniforms. Gossip is court, memory the archive. Boasts meet theatrical boredom. Chronic hoarders discover that help evaporates. Tolerated scrounging lets a small hand steal a bite because guarding would cost more. Demand sharing asking outright turns markets upside down and etiquette right side up. Cuts carry signals. A generous strip given publicly to a thin ant counts for more than a secret gift. Backfat to a root-heavy household, says scene. The head, obvious and awkward, travels where honor must be edible. Marrow bones go where children grow. Its biology staged as theater. Ritual ridicule keeps egos fire-stized. The miracle animal becomes that bony apology. If strutting persists, sanctions follow. Last served, least helped. First on night watch, when hyenas rehearse, ostracism lurks, rare and final. Credit flows beyond the final act. Carriers of water, wood, and carcass are remembered by the ladle. The dawn ember tender sees their bowl filled. Even absence has a portion set aside for the injured, widowed, or late returning. A camp that forgets its invisibles fills with them. At larger nodes, sharing scales into alliance. Surplus becomes an invitation. Bones pile. Songs lengthen. Visitors leave with calories and the name of a person who won't fail them at a bad ford. Reputations travel farther than goods. A fair distributor is a safe path in human form. A stingy camp becomes a detour. Courtship borrows the same logic. Fire itself is shared coals passed hand to hand, wrapped in ash and bark, offered like bread. Food fills for hours. Embers fill with tomorrow. After the last bowl is wiped, survival changes shape and starts crying. Children arrive with high demands and poor hazard awareness. One mother can't meet every deadline, so care fractures on purpose. Arms multiply. Grandmothers bring the calm of victories over colic. Older siblings fetch and ferry. Fathers provision, protect, and babysit. Uncles and allies trade effort for future favors. The nursery widens until it resembles the camp. Biology adds a clause. Frequent nursing delays fertility. Spacing buys mothers time to rebuild, and older children time to become less flammable. Cross-nursing turns neighbors into kin. Weaning leans on mashed roots, pounded dried meat with broth, thin porridges made safer by heat and habit. Carrying is engineering disguised as tenderness. Slings hold infants high against heat and heartbeat. Hip carries free hands. Furs and hoods make walking microclimates. Co-sleeping is default babies nested inside rings of people and banked embers. Nightwatch learns cough detection. Children are expensive for a long time, the point, not the bug. Long childhoods and healed fractures say someone carried and fed the injured for weeks. Adoption appears when a camp refuses to waste labor or affection. Reputation accrues in the nursery. The teen who carries a wailer through a storm earns loud praise. The napper earns the opposite. Grandmother's influence grows one soup at a time. Where they live longer, more grandchildren live at all. Helpers at a nest isn't sentiment. It's an energy budget with lullabies. Play teachers beside chores. Little hands twist fiber into rope while braiding wind. Small feet learn safe creek lines while chasing dragonflies. Jokes wrap taboos about fire and water. A mock trial for a stolen strip ends with chores and a grandparent hiding a smile. Risk scales with strollers. One adult with 3 children is a hazard magnet. 3 adults with 6 children are a neighborhood. Lines of march shift, so the slowest legs set tempo. Sentries rotate at rivers. Tools are blunt near small fingers, sharp where they cannot reach. Food sharing folds into childcare. A mother with a cold eats first. A weanling gets the softest mash. When luck sours, rations shrink precisely, not randomly. Memory notes, who fed whom last lean season. Teaching peaks at mealtime. A bowl moves clockwise and small eyes track the invisible arithmetic of fairness. Instruction comes in fragments. Which root needs roasting till it smells right. How to rub and winnow seed. How a retoucher's rhythm edits an edge. How to bank coals before sleep and to feed from the windward side. Stories carry far curricula. Ridges that drink storms. Springs that whisper by the third moon. Lagoons that pay patience after west winds. A tale of a brilliant fool hides first aid. The splint, the sling, the signs, a wound is heating. Music makes instruction taste like pleasure. Refrains, pin sequences, roast, pound, pour, check, tie, test, wait. Gesture finishes the job. 2 fingers snake a track. A flat palm hovers over a pot. A wrist tilt sets a snare. A pause lets a child be almost wrong, and then more right than rumor. Heat attracts appetite and opinion. Quarrels start small. A thin portion, a forgotten water trip, a joke like a stone to the shin. Laughter arrives. The miracle becomes an accident. If teasing fails, mediation wears domestic clothes. An elder retells the argument until only the bone remains. Another proposes a swap everyone dislikes equally and thus accepts. Publicness is the point apologies and overcorrections are performed. Gifts travel conspicuously to cauterize rumor. When blame won't stick, a work party repairs what hunger, temper, or weather broke. Some disputes prefer song, mockery, duels, spare blood. There is also the right to vanish. Bands fuse when food peaks. Fission when tempers or resources thin. Distance performs what words can't. Later they meet at salmon or nut time, and shared labor stitches what argument cut. Sanctions escalate slowly. Chronic freeriding meets chore lists and jokes that bite. Chronic aggression meets cool avoidance. Ostracism exists. rare and costly. Violence happens, but the culture of the fire conspires against it. Tools have better jobs than ending storing lines. Homicide bankrupts small populations. Fairness is daily maintenance. Rotate who serves, guards, carries, decides. Marriages act as treaties. Visits extend obligations until they look like landscape. Debts settle in marrow and labor, not blood. Seasons clear their throats. Maps shift. Camps fold. Racks lashed. Cords coiled. Ember bundle tucked like a heartbeat in bark and ash. Roots unspool ridge lines that keep feet dry. Creek beds that apologize for being crooked. Beaches that behave like roads when tides mind their manners. The circuit is a necklace of necessary places. Salmon runs, clean passes, groves that drown the ground in fat seeds, salt licks scribbled by hooves. At each node, households recoup dodge, smoke rises from many hearths. Cousins multiply. Aggregation turns surplus into currency and strangers into obligations. Fish are split and racked. Meat smoked till the wind smells full. Nuts poured like dry rain. Distribution scales. The ladle learns new names. Gifts acquire itineraries rendered fat leaves with rumor and returns as safety at the next camp. Objects travel to. Obsidian walks inland and flakes into knives far from volcanoes. Shell beads pretend to be small moons and declare coastal friends. Red earth stains skin and tools and quietly marks alliances. Songs carry roots as verses. Elders conduct the tempo. Gestures edit memory. Marriages are treaties written in bone and fatigue. Two camps discover they share grandparents. Genetics and social math both approve. Big meetings host a softer bureaucracy. Old disputes are filed by contests, gifts, and jokes with sharp teeth. Techniques change hands. Cleaner notches, sturdier knots. Plants that behave after 3 rinses and a long boil. Even fire has diplomacy. Embers wander between shelters after wet seasons erase coals. Fission returns when nodes tire. The racks look bored. The grove grows stingy. Camps dissolve into walking units, humming at the edges of each other's hearing. Caches get audited. An empty pit becomes a fox story with excellent morals. Later, archaeology will map all this in trash and treasure ash lenses, like pages. Bones snapped at sweet points. Exotic stones blinking from local dirt. The living map needs none of it. It measures itself in toddlers who stop in the right shade unprompted, in dogs that drift to the front before the trail kinks left, in elders who look at the sky and announce that the wind just posted a memo. What holds through it all is the same plain sorcery, food widened by sharing, risk narrowed by company, heat carried hand to hand until night forgets its manners and remembers them again. The circuit turns, fires bloom and dim, and the wheel refuses to break because so many small hands keep repairing it mid-roll quietly, sleepily, with competence that looks like luck from far away and like love from up close. Dusk falls like an order to quiet, thorough, unimpressed by excuses. The plane rewrites paperwork in under an hour. Day animals clock out. Crepuscular professionals clock in with teeth. Eyes retire early, ears pick up the job, and noses earn overdue respect. Grass becomes punctuation, partying low and wide for something big, quivering high and narrow for something small. In forests, darkness doesn't descend, it thickens, crowded with unseen furniture. The rule holds steady. If it glides and ignores branches, it hunts by sound. If it slinks with the wind in its pocket, it hunts by patience. Predators treat twilight like a holiday sale. Lions and leopards move in silence. Hyenas advertise longer hours and better endurance. Crocodiles, river bureaucrats, wait with eyes at the surface. Venomous snakes patrol thermal highways. Owls cancel their own noise, and the only proof they exist is sudden mouse bankruptcy. Humans, brilliant in daylight, fail vision at night with enthusiasm. Pupils widen but not like a cat's. Color collapses to gray. Every twig becomes a memo, every cough a headline. Schedules bend with the sky. Fat moons invite long nights checking traps, gleaning shellfish, walking ridgelines. New moons erase paths and embolden predators. Camps tighten, voices dim. Water trips become choreographed sprints. Cloud cover rewrites the script without consent. A lake vanishes to rumor. A trail surprises every dozen steps. Grassland wind is a friend, carrying scent away and noise forward. In forest, it conspires with leaves until everything sounds like an approach. Risk has microclimates. Grass near water after dusk is a festival for poor decisions. Cliffs invite gravity. River bends double as crocodile dining rooms. Even harmless calls raise suspicion. Nightjars cover a cat's footfalls. Frogs curtain a hunter's patience. Children learn the taxonomy fast hyena, whoop. Leopards sogrunt, owls question. Wild dogs chitter. Group size becomes life insurance. Alone at night is a genre. Together is policy. Centuries rotate not by tradition but because eyelids betray. When a cat is rumored, bodies sleep closer, a braid with sharper ends, facing out. Meat racks shift upwind, refuse downwind, and dogs when they join history claim liminal posts with joy. Stars lend small favors. Plains people memorize constellations. In forests, orientation sticks to silhouettes, streams, and slope. The cold hour before dawn is mean as temperature dips. Vigilance sags, and predators make final bids. Darkness isn't evil, it's just a competent auditor of confidence. But there's a countermeasure that hums and glows. Fire pulls predators back, hands forward, minds into a circle where fear can be shared. Coaxed properly low, steady it, turns night into negotiation. The ember that refuses to die becomes a border post. With a few twigs and a breath, the circle brightens and the dark steps back. Predators aren't magically afraid. Some test edges but most prefer their paperwork unlit. Good fires are groomed, not conjured. Embers banked under ash, mean dawn arrives without drama. Fuel is staged dry, wood close, green for smudge, bark stacked against rain's sense of humor. Flames are fed from the windward side, kept low so smoke rises politely. Where trees are stingy, dung burns with sulky usefulness. On resinous coasts, torches carry authority. Light has a craft. Too much flame blinds, too little erases depth. The sweet spot is ember red, with a whisper of flame enough to read a face. Sharpen a tool, recognize a neighbor's approach. Smudge fires deter insects. Lamps of fat and fiber glow steady. Their soot painting ceilings archaeology will later read. Hearths redden soil, crack stone, leave ash lenses and charcoal flecks, turning geology into autobiography. Fire deters more than lions. Crocodiles dislike flicker. Snakes avoid vibration. Scorpions hate swept rims. Smell obeys triage. Meet upwind, refuse downwind. Smoke where flies convene. The result isn't safety, just better odds. Embers travel too bundled in bark, coddled in ash, carried like treaties. If one dies, a neighbor's call arrives without ceremony. Debt already understood. Children learn hearth laws the hard way, with every adult enforcing glances. Light invites layout. Where to sleep so sparks don't audition disasters. Where to hang meat so scent doesn't advertise. Where to fence with thorns so hyenas argue with wind, not sleepers. Rings widen into design. Sleeping arcs, brush barricades, ember paths, drainage trenches, pebble paths to water and latrine. Food climbs into rafters or hangs from slick poles. Pits disguise under mats and dirt. Water stays lidded. Tools sit close but safe. Bodies arc around the glow, heads to heat, feet outward like blunt spears. Boundaries grow teeth out of thorns. Gaps are left narrow and predictable, so watchers know where to look. Refuse drops downwind and downslope, away from wells. Racks stand tall enough to shame hyenas, smoky enough to ruin optimism. Rain gets managed by trenches, winds by low brush walls, sparks by smoke discipline. Even entrances acquire codes. Branches leaning one way mean in, the other don't. Sentries rotate by stars and embers. First watch while bellies are full. Second when sky cools. Third at the coldest hour. The job is listening. A single snap, small rhythm, many small. Grass parting silently, a large problem. Signals are minimalist, cough for relief, whistle for backup, hiss for silence. Dogs eventually join, noses curled at thresholds, tails thumping for foxes. Bodies stiff for cats. Archaeology reads the leftovers. Ash spread wide, arcs of post holes, bone scatters downwind, tooth marks on discarded ribs, napping floors just outside the sleeping ring. Improvisation is rarely repeated. Architecture is fatigued management, telling sparks where to die, feet where to land, strangers where to stop. Once rehearsed, the ring hums glow steady, routines intact and rest is possible. Sleep isn't a curtain but a beaded doorway. Nights often come in two pieces, deep drowse, then a wakeful pocket for chores, stories, intimacy, or nursing, then softer descent. The rhythm shows in hearth debris and ethnographic notes. Bodies negotiate positions, infants and elders in the warm center, adults on the windward wall, feet pointed outward. Co-sleeping solves thermoregulation, hides breathe, smoke deters insects, embers promise dawn. Watchers run on eyes, stars, habits, Orions, slant logs, handovers. A moon behind a ridge means to wake someone who won't yawn into a spear. Flames kept low to avoid both glare and blindness. In the wakeful pocket, sinew gets teased, pitch softened, edges retouched. Lamps glow steady, low voices trade residue, near miss with a snake, smoke 2 valleys over. Dreams are treated like weather noticed, but not policy. Toward dawn, breath in the ring sinks, then forgets. The night carries its own bureaucracy, nudges for snorers, rotations for children, coughs noted, sticks added to smell. Dogs, once admitted, sleep exactly where they should, pretending it was their idea. Archaeology preserves modest traces, soot ceilings from lamps, layered ash from banking, debris halos from retouching. Mornings read the notes without ceremony. Travel in low light has etiquette. Fat moons allow ridgeline routes, safer sightlines, if not silhouettes. New moons shrank roots to the familiar. Rivers wait for daylight, since crocodiles consider darkness benefits. Stars and constellations guide. When clouds interfere, slope, smell, and air currents step in. Forests complicate navigation, leans on tree shapes. Stream whispers, slope underfoot. Feet change grammar. Steps shorten, spacing tightens. Hands rest on shoulders. Single file braid sound. Leaders clear webs. Followers carry torches. Rearguards watch behind. Corners mean pauses. Signals travel by touch. A sting on the face passed back as a warning. Along coasts, tides scheduled gleaning. Shell beds open under moons. Wares checked by feel. Torches over water lure insects, then fish, then hands. The rule is blunt. Work the ebb, leave before flood. Evidence lingers, shell middens, stacked in seasonal bands, stone fish traps, ridge paths worn into bone. Deep cave art implies torchlit processions. Predators edit schedules, attacks spike on moonless nights, so safest hours are early moon or last watch before dawn. Tools adapt, torches shaded by bark funnels, embers cradled, snares set from windward. Redundancy rules, spare coals, extra cord, sharp jokes. Roots mark themselves lightly, split branches, cairns, step counts. Children learn maps with calves first, memory later. Sound becomes convoy language. Words shrink, consonants carry, vowels dim. Hisses break, clicks warn, murmurs tighten ranks. Groups develop microdialects, palms on arms, stone knocks for stop and go, gravel scuffs marking turns. Predators publish schedules in their own voices, and humans read them out loud with eyebrows. Music sneaks in because rhythm holds ankles steady and tempers slow. Work songs cut errors, lullabies by silence. Alarms escalate, whispers, rattles, log thumps. Communication doubles as camouflage, mimicry risky, but sometimes useful. Babies demand triage milk is the universal hush. Older children learn the budget of sound. Dogs add vocabulary of barks and noses that report news and scent. Drums, rattles, smoky beacons carry headlines across distances. Stories fill the gaps. Night turns noises into characters. Societies answer with myths that enforce curfews and rules. Tricksters teach false calls. Long-armed child stealers enforce perimeters. Nameless moaners warn against wandering. Taboos layer on. No fresh blood after dusk. No high torches. No loud laughter. Initiations turn panic into competence teaching owl calls. Camp maps by touch. Flame carrying without kindling oneself. Punishments favor poetry. Ridicule. Chores. Carrying embers in rain. Myths update with accidents and seasons. Benevolent figures justify sharing. Superstition by daylight is logistics at night. Thorn fences become stages. Branches become signs. Offerings become decoys. Compliance comes faster through stories than through memos. But myth doesn't desiccate meat. For that, rituals of ash, lids, smoke, and pits apply. Ash dusts food. Lines, pits, doubles as soap. Earth cools caches. Snow archives meat. Bark collars block rodents. Low smokers hum through damp nights. Hyenas sniff refuse downwind, so scraps are thrown far. Parasites lose to heat. Insects lose to lids. Dogs, later, annotate scent chapters. Odds improve, never guarantee. Other people complicate the ledger. Visitors may bring news, embers, or trouble. Protocols grow. Weapons down. Names called. Torches hooded. Small gifts first. Hosts reply with choreography, empty hands, coded clicks, visible flanking. Beacons signal over distance. Steady flame means safe. Staggered flames mean no. Smoky column means busy. Visits peak at bright moons when surplus wants an audience. Trade turns grease and beads into alliances. Courtship borrows the same logistics. Raids exist too. Nightwaves paperwork. Fires kicked flat. Racks toppled. Dogs eventually pry advantage back. Archaeology records the tracer's broken points, gnawed ribs, hurried burials, but more often absence. To leave a camp with an improved reputation, visitors offer news before requests. Hosts remember debts without ledgers, and dawn carries half the conversation. Gossip, favors, and roots knit safety nets. Faces around the fire became dashboards. Human eyes, pale sclera visible, broadcast intent even in smoke. Firelight flattens color, but sharpens contrast. Glances become drumbeats. Share hush. Look. Startle reflexes pay their rent. The amygdala votes prepare before thought clears its throat. Better false alarms than missed predators. Other senses pitch in hearing rhythms. Smelling banks. Skin reading temperature shifts. Sleep adapts to segmented nights. Wakeful intervals host chores and treaties. Firelight lengthens social hours, spreading story, ridicule, and rulemaking. Gossip and laughter enforce cooperation. Dogs change the syllabus, turning smell into policy and letting people sleep deeper. Moon cycles leave fingerprints. Predators hunt better on dark nights. People huddle closer. Bodies adjust to lunar calendars. Hormones and temperatures dancing with light. Pareidolia keeps shadows useful, better to mistake a bush for a boar than the other way. Over generations, hypervigilance becomes competence. Startle that resets. Groups that reach consensus in a breath. Habits tuned to threat and fluent in cooperation. The night never cared, but people sitting shoulder to shoulder did.